The question shattered the silence of the glass-walled office, like a crack in flawless crystal. The CEO's voice was calm, controlled, almost clinical, but her eyes trembled with something far more fragile. "Why does your daughter call me mommy?" she had asked. And in that single heartbeat, the world seemed to stop for Armand Qureshi. Before we step into what happened next, take a moment right now. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the quiet miracles that happen in ordinary lives, please like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Whisper Tales 3. Stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of love can rewrite destiny. It had been a bright Tuesday morning, sunlight spilling generously over the city skyline. Inside the towering headquarters of Alvera Technologies, Armand stood with his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his palms damp despite the cool air conditioning. He was not dressed like the other department managers. His suit was clean but worn at the edges, carefully pressed the night before, while his 5-year-old daughter colored beside him at the small dining table in their modest apartment. Armand had not always planned to be a single father. Life had simply cornered him into it. 3 years earlier, his wife Sana had passed away suddenly after a brief illness, leaving behind a little girl named Meher who still believed that stars were holes in heaven where light poured through. Since then, Armand's days had been a blur of daycare drop-offs, rushed breakfasts, deadlines, and bedtime stories told in a voice heavy with exhaustion. He had learned how to braid hair from YouTube tutorials. He had learned how to cook tiny heart-shaped pancakes. He had learned how to swallow his grief so his daughter wouldn't see it. When Alvera Technologies announced the leadership restructuring, Armand never imagined he would find himself reporting directly to the company's newly appointed CEO, Zara Rahmani. She was known across the industry as a fierce strategist, the woman who had rebuilt failing divisions and turned them profitable within months. In boardrooms, her presence was commanding. In media interviews, she was poised and sharp. To most employees, she was untouchable. To Meher, she was something else entirely. It had started accidentally. One afternoon, when Meher's daycare closed unexpectedly, Armand had no choice but to bring her to the office for a few hours. He had been mortified, apologizing to everyone in sight. But Zara had noticed the little girl sitting quietly in the corner of the conference room, her small legs swinging above the carpet, her crayons neatly arranged beside her. Instead of irritation, Zara had crouched down to Meher's level. She had asked about the drawing Meher was working on, a bright picture of a house with 2 stick figures and a sun that smiled too widely. Meher had looked up at her with solemn eyes and said that her drawing was missing something important. When Zara asked what, Meher had simply replied, "A mommy." No one knew that Zara had frozen for a second before gently picking up a crayon and helping Meher draw another figure into the picture. After that day, whenever Meher visited the office, Zara would spare a few minutes for her. A cookie from the executive lounge, a quick tour of the balcony garden, a patient ear while Meher explained the complex politics of kindergarten friendships. To Zara, it may have been small gestures. To Meher, it was sunlight. Armand had noticed the change slowly. His daughter, who once clung to him anxiously in unfamiliar places, now walked confidently through the lobby, waving to the receptionist. She would speak of Auntie Zara at home, describing how she smelled like jasmine and how her office had the best view of the sky. Then one afternoon, as Zara walked past Armand's desk and Meher ran into her arms without hesitation, the word slipped out naturally, innocently, as if it had always been there, "Mommy." The entire floor had gone silent, and now, standing in Zara's office with the city gleaming beyond the glass walls, Armand felt the weight of that moment pressing down on him. He saw confusion in her eyes, but also something deeper, fear perhaps, or longing. He took a steady breath and told her the truth. He told her how Meher barely remembered her own mother's face, how at night she would sometimes ask whether heaven had visiting hours, how children attach their hearts to the warmth they feel, not to titles or logic. He admitted that he had tried to correct Meher gently, but she had insisted that a mommy was simply someone who made you feel safe and seen. As he spoke, Zara's expression shifted. The armor she wore in board meetings seemed to crack. She turned toward the window, blinking rapidly against the brightness of the sun. What Armand didn't know was that Zara had her own private ache. Years ago, she had lost a child in the final trimester of pregnancy. She had buried not only a baby but the version of herself that had dreamed of bedtime lullabies and scraped knees. Meher's innocent word had reopened a door she had locked tightly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of traffic far below filled the silence. Finally, Zara turned back to him, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. She confessed that she had never meant to overstep. She had only wanted to be kind. She had not realized that kindness could carry such weight. Armand shook his head gently. He told her that kindness was the only reason he was still standing, that the world had been unbearably cold after Sana's passing, and that people like her, people who paused long enough to care, were the reason his daughter still believed in goodness. From that day forward, something subtle shifted. Zara did not replace Sana. No one ever could. But she became a steady presence in Meher's life, attending a school art exhibition on a sunny Saturday afternoon, cheering the loudest at a kindergarten sports day, bringing books about brave girls and resilient hearts. Armand watched as laughter slowly returned to corners of his life that had gathered dust. He found himself smiling more freely, speaking without the constant undertone of sorrow. The office, once a place of pressure and silent judgment, began to feel like a community. Months later, during the company's annual family day held in the courtyard under the bright afternoon sky, Meher tugged at Zara's hand and led her to Armand. She held both their hands together with determined innocence. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, just three people standing beneath a clear blue sky, choosing connection over fear. Sometimes family is not defined by blood or by law. Sometimes it is born from shared wounds and gentle hands willing to hold them. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to Whisper Tales 3 for more stories that remind us of humanity's quiet strength. And before we close, take a second to comment the word kindness below, because your engagement helps stories like this reach the hearts that need them most. In the end, the question that once echoed with uncertainty became the answer itself. Why did his daughter call her mommy? Because love had stepped into a space grief had left behind. Because sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary workday, beneath bright daylight and corporate titles, destiny whispers softly, and someone chooses to listen.